Good morning, it's July 10th, and this is To My Liberal Friends. Well, Joe Biden and Democrats have turned to the oldest trick in the book when it comes to political campaigning. In the past, this normally took place in the back rooms of Congress and the White House, where politicians decided how to hand out appropriated funds where it would do the most good. The president would look at where his allies in Congress were, and if they were in trouble, you could count on some new road project being announced or some other grant of government largesse. But Joe Biden has turned that game up a notch and is openly, without remorse, trying to buy votes by canceling debts owed by students who borrowed the money. He tried to do it via executive action, even after admitting he did not believe he had the authority to do it, and that brought a challenge in the courts. The Supreme Court had to finally rule on the matter, and in a 6-3 decision, they let him know that he was right the first time. He did not have the authority to wipe out that debt. To begin with, we should look at some facts that are already in place. In bankruptcy, one of the things you cannot get canceled unless there's some extremely extenuating circumstances is a student loan debt. And there's a good reason for this provision is included in bankruptcy law. If you could wipe out that debt by declaring bankruptcy, every student in the country would borrow the maximum amount allowed each year, and then a few months after graduation, they would declare bankruptcy. Presto, the debt's gone, and they take a hit on their credit score for 7 to 10 years, but since they're in most cases in their early 20s, the hit's well worth the risk. When the court blocked Biden's debt forgiveness program, it angered many of those that were counting on having that debt erased. They'd not been paying on the debt for the past few years due to COVID, and in some cases, they've never repaid a nickel since they graduated during the grace period. They're angry because Joe Biden promised them he would get rid of this debt, and they're counting on not having to pay it back. In fact, they began to believe that they should not have to pay it back. It was simply something owed to them by Biden and the government. And this led Biden to come up with Plan B. He's calling it the Savings on a Valuable Education, SAVE. And you have to love how politicians come up with these catchy names for their bills and plans. And already the Department of Education is tuning up the regulations. They will have an income-driven repayment plan, which is called IDR, and a plan to provide relief for those borrowers when payments begin again in August. Here are the basic tenets of the plan as they've leaked out. The income amounts protected from the payment calculations on the SAVE plan will increase to 225% of the federal poverty guidelines. That means borrowers with relatively low income, single people earning less than $32,805 or $67,000 for a family, will have their payment amount set at zero if they enroll in the plan. The Biden administration estimates that more than 1 million additional borrowers will be eligible for a $0 payment. Borrowers currently enrolled in the revised pay-as-you-earn repay will automatically move to the replacement SAVE program. Borrowers not eligible for a zero payment on the SAVE plan should expect to save $1,000 a year compared to the current repay plan. A single borrower could save $91 a month on payments, with a family of 4 saving $187 a month. Borrowers who have a payment that does not cover all the interest accruing on their loans each month will no longer have the remaining interest added to their balance. The elimination of negative amortization means borrowers with low or zero payments will no longer see their total loan balance constantly grow due to unpaid interest. And since they're not having to pay, it's going to go down. The administration says about 70% of borrowers enrolled in an IDR plan before the payment pause will benefit from this change. Married borrowers who file their taxes separately will no longer be required to include their spouse's income in their payment calculation for SAVE. Spouses will also be excluded from household size if they're enrolled in SAVE and file their taxes separately. Think about that. A woman could have a degree and owe a significant amount, but her husband has a very good job at some investment banking firm, but that money doesn't count, so she doesn't have to pay. This is nothing more than trying to buy votes by Joe Biden. They might as well stand at the voting place and hand out $50 bills if you vote the way they want you to. Why stop at student loans? Why should people have to pay for their car loans? After all, they need a car to get to work and do things they need to do. If the mortgage is starting to squeeze them, then have the government, read that taxpayers, take on that task as well. And you can bet this will generate another court challenge, and it will go all the way to the Supreme Court once again. The price tag on this thing is about $30 billion a year for the next 10 years, which means it's in excess of $300 billion, and that's just a starting price. What do you tell all the current and future borrowers? This is a clear signal to borrow away and don't worry about repaying that debt. Uncle Joe will come up with a plan to force the taxpayers to assume your debt. The real question that Biden and his fellow Democrats don't want to address is why the cost of a college education keeps rising faster than inflation, and significantly faster? Why are the universities top-heavy with administrators at bloated salaries? Why do schools like Harvard charge outrageous tuitions while sitting on massive endowment funds? It's all because all of those administrators and professors are liberal Democrats, and you cannot offend them. So they would just allow these schools to keep raising the cost and letting students borrow more and more money and then tell the taxpayers, sorry, but you have to absorb that debt because we need those votes and it wouldn't be fair to them to not do what we promised them. This has been To My Liberal Friends. Thanks for listening. If you enjoy the podcast, subscribe and recommend it to your friends. And if you have a comment, I'd love to hear from you.